I woke up to the sound of my mother crying in the kitchen, not because she was sad, but because she was counting the pennies we needed for rent, and for the first time in my life, I realized that being poor isn't just a lack of money, it's a slow-motion car crash that lasts for years, until I decided to turn our misery into a twisted game that made us millions, but at the cost of our souls. Have you ever been so desperate that you'd trade your dignity for a viral moment? Or would you stay hungry just to keep your conscience clean? I need you to tell me if I'm a genius or a monster, because by the time this story ends, you might actually hate me for how we got rich. We were the family everyone in town looked down on, living in a house that felt like it was held together by duct tape and prayers, where the heater only worked on the days it wasn't cold, and the fridge was usually a graveyard for expired condiments. My dad had lost his job at the mill after 20 years of loyalty, and my mom was working 3 part-time cleaning jobs just to keep the lights on, while I sat there as a teenager feeling utterly powerless. Every day at school was a lesson in humiliation, wearing hand-me-downs that were 2 sizes too big and smelling like the cheap detergent we bought in bulk, watching the rich kids flaunt their new phones like they were toys. I remember sitting in the back of the classroom, trying to hide the holes in my sneakers with my backpack, feeling the heat of shame rise to my face every time the teacher asked for a field trip fee I knew we couldn't afford. It wasn't just about the things we didn't have. It was the constant, gnawing anxiety that the next knock on the door would be someone coming to take away the little we had left. I remember the exact smell of that house, a mix of damp wood and the cheap, vinegary scent of the generic cleaning supplies my mom brought home from her shifts. We'd sit around a single-space heater in the winter, our breath visible in the air, pretending we were camping just to keep my younger sister from crying. My father would sit in his armchair, staring at the blank TV, because we couldn't pay the cable bill, his hands rough and scarred from years of manual labor that ultimately earned him nothing but a pink slip and a thank you for your service letter. It was a cycle of despair that felt impossible to break, a gravity that pulled us deeper into the mud every time we tried to climb out. But everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon when I recorded my dad accidentally tripping over a garden hose while trying to fix a leak. It was a pathetic, clumsy moment, but I edited it with a bit of dark humor and posted it online, and within 3 hours, it had 100,000 views. People weren't just laughing, they were obsessed with our authentic struggle. That was the spark. I realized that people didn't want to see polished influencers. They wanted to see the raw, messy, and sometimes cruel reality of a family on the brink. I sat my parents down and told them that if we played our cards right, we would never have to worry about rent again. At first, they were hesitant, but the first check from the platform was for more money than my mom made in a month of scrubbing floors. I had to convince my dad that it wasn't charity, it was entertainment. I told him he was an actor now, even if the role he was playing was just a sadder version of himself. We started small, doing poverty pranks. Things like eating cat food because we're broke, or fake eviction notice prank on my sleeping mom. The views skyrocketed. We weren't just a family anymore. We were a brand. We started staging elaborate scenarios where we'd prank our rich neighbors by pretending to be their long-lost homeless relatives. Or we'd go to high-end car dealerships and film ourselves getting kicked out for looking poor. I remember the first time we walked into a Rolex store wearing rags, the hidden camera stitched into my hoodie. The look of utter disdain on the salesman's face was worth $50,000 in ad revenue. We were selling our humiliation, and business was booming. I'd spend hours in the basement, which I had converted into a makeshift editing suite with the first few $1,000s we made, learning how to manipulate the footage to make our lives look even more desperate than they actually were. I learned that a slow-motion shot of my mother's tired eyes paired with some royalty-free sad piano music could double the likes and shares. I became a surgeon of sympathy, cutting and stitching our dignity together to create the perfect viral product. The comment sections were a war zone, with half the people pitying us and the other half calling us trash, but every hate comment was just more engagement, and every engagement was another dollar in our bank account. Within 6 months, we moved from that rotting house into a suburban mansion, but the pranks didn't stop, they just got meaner. We started pranking each other with fake lottery wins, fake affairs, and even fake medical emergencies, just to see the look of pure terror on each other's faces for the camera. We were addicted to the rush of the notification bell. My dad, who used to be a man of few words and high integrity, was now wearing designer tracksuits and practicing his crying face in the mirror before we hit record. He'd spend hours perfecting the way his voice cracked, making sure the lighting hit his faux tears just right. My mom, who once wouldn't dream of lying, was now scripting emotional breakdowns for the vlog. She would sit at the kitchen island of our new home, surrounded by expensive appliances she didn't know how to use, and weep for a camera lens about how much she missed the simple life. Only to check the analytics the second I yelled cut. We were rich, richer than I ever dreamed, but I started to notice that we didn't talk to each other unless the lens was open. The dinner table, once a place where we shared our struggles and supported one another, was now a set. We had professional lighting rigs in the dining room. We didn't ask how each other's day was. We asked if the footage was backed up. We were living in a beautiful house filled with expensive furniture, yet it felt colder than the shack we came from. I started feeling like a director in a horror movie where the actors were my own parents. I remember one specific afternoon where my sister fell and scraped her knee. It was a minor injury, but my first instinct wasn't to grab a bandage. It was to grab the gimbal. I told her to keep crying and look at the camera, while I filmed my mom rushing in to comfort her. It was a complete fabrication of a mother's love, captured for 4K resolution and a mid-roll ad break. One night, I caught my dad filming my mom while she was actually sick, whispering to the camera about how scary the situation was instead of calling a doctor. He was framing the shot, adjusting the white balance while she shivered under a designer throw blanket. That's when the line between reality and the content completely evaporated. We had become the very people we used to hate, using our own trauma and the humiliation of others as fuel for a digital fire. We even started pranking the staff I had hired, the maid, the gardener, staging thefts or firings, just to see them beg for their jobs, all while the record light blinked red in the shadows. I remember the look on our housekeeper's face when I told her she was being fired for stealing a watch I had hidden in her bag. She broke down in tears, talking about her own children she had to support, while I secretly zoomed in on her quivering lip. When I told her it was a prank and gave her $100 tip, I thought I was being generous. I didn't realize I was being a tyrant. It was sickening, but the bank account kept growing, and that number was the only thing that made me feel safe. I became obsessed with the numbers, staying up until 4 a.m. replying to comments and plotting the next big hit. I felt like if we stopped, the mansion would vanish and we'd be back in the cold shack within seconds. I was terrified of the silence, terrified of the moments when the cameras weren't rolling, because in those moments, I had to look at what we had become. We were hollow. We were polished, expensive, high-definition shells of the people we used to be. My father stopped going to the park because people would recognize him and ask him to do the trip or make the face. My mother stopped seeing her old friends because they couldn't understand why she was living a lie for the world to see. We were isolated in our luxury, surrounded by cameras that felt like the bars of a cage. So that is the situation I found myself in. Trapped in a golden cage of my own making where my entire family had become actors in a never-ending reality show. Before I tell you about the final prank that almost sent us all to prison and destroyed our family forever, I want you to pause and comment below. Would you keep going if it meant your family never had to be hungry again? Or would you pull the plug on the fame? I really need to know what you would have done in my shoes. Was the trade-off worth the safety of a roof that didn't leak? The final straw came when I decided to film the ultimate heirloom prank. I wanted something that would go down in internet history. I wanted a video so shocking that it would cement our legacy as the kings of the platform. I told my parents we were going to pretend that we had lost everything in a legal battle and that the feds were coming to seize the house. I hired professional actors, dressed them in tactical gear, and spent thousands on realistic props, fake warrants, evidence bags, the works. I set up hidden cameras in every single room of that house, from the bathrooms to the master bedroom. I didn't tell my parents it was a joke until the very last second. I wanted that raw, visceral fear of going back to being poor to be the centerpiece of our channel. I wanted the world to see the terror in their eyes when they thought the dream was over, when they thought they were going back to the pennies and the cold. When the officers burst in at 6 a.m., the sun was just starting to hit the marble floors. My dad didn't just cry, he collapsed. He looked at the fake warrant with eyes that didn't see paper, but saw the end of his dignity, the end of the only thing that had kept him upright for the last year. He had a genuine panic attack, gasping for air on the floor he had worked so hard to buy, clutching his chest as if his heart was literally breaking under the weight of the betrayal. My mom was on her knees, screaming and begging for mercy, offering the actors her jewelry, her phone, her wedding ring. Anything to make them stop, anything to keep the life I had given them. I stood there with my phone, capturing every second of their genuine agony, adjusting the angle to get a better view of my father's trembling hands and my mother's tear-streaked face. I was thinking about the thumbnail, the title, "We Lost It All," emotional, and the millions of views this would get. I felt a surge of adrenaline, not empathy. I was calculating the CPM, the retention rate, the viral potential, while my father was literally fighting for air 2 feet away from me. When I finally yelled, "It's a prank. Look, the cameras are there and there. It's all fake, Dad. We're fine. We're still rich." The silence that followed was louder than any scream I've ever heard. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that filled the room like lead. My father stayed on the floor for a long time, his face pressed against the cold stone. When he finally looked up at me, it wasn't with relief or even anger. It was a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. He realized in that moment that I hadn't just played a joke. I had viewed his deepest, most primal trauma as nothing more than a thumbnail. I had weaponized the very fear that kept him awake at night for years. The fear of failing his family again. The officers I hired looked at each other, uncomfortable, and slipped out the back door, realizing they had been part of something truly dark. My dad got up slowly, his joints popping, and he didn't say a word. He didn't scream, he didn't hit me, he didn't even look at the cameras. He just walked to the master bedroom. The video went viral, of course. It broke every record we had. We trended globally for 3 days. My inbox was flooded with brands wanting to sponsor us, and my followers count was ticking up by the thousands every hour. But that night, the house was silent. There was no celebration, no checking the stats together over a fancy dinner. My dad packed a small bag, just the old grease-stained clothes he kept from the mill days, the ones I had mocked for being out of style and peasant clothes. He didn't want the money, the cars, or the fame. He walked into my room, his eyes hollow and dead, and handed me his high-end smartphone, the one I had bought him with the proceeds from his own humiliation. He told me that being poor was better than being a clown for a world that only loves you when you're hurting. He said he'd rather starve with his pride than eat steak on a stage. He told me he didn't recognize the person standing in front of him anymore, and that the son he loved died the day the channel started. My mom followed him a week later, leaving me alone in a 20-room mansion with nothing but a silver play button and a sense of profound emptiness. She didn't even say goodbye. She just left a note on the granite island that read, "I hope the views were worth the family." I tried to film a where they went video, a my parents left me vlog, but for the first time, I couldn't press the record button. My hands were shaking too hard. I looked at the camera lens and saw not a tool for success, but a black hole that had swallowed everything I loved. I have millions in the bank now, but I have no one to eat dinner with. I wander through these halls, and the echo of my own footsteps is the only thing I hear. The house is full of smart tech that can tell me the weather or play any song in the world, but it can't tell me where my father is. I realized that while we were busy pranking the world, the biggest prank was on us. We thought we were winning, but we lost everything that actually mattered. I thought I was the hero of the story, the one who saved us from the dirt, but I was just the one who made the dirt look fancy. I spend my days scrolling through the comments on that final video. LOL, he really thought he was going to jail, one person wrote. Best prank ever, said another. They don't see the broken man behind the content. They don't see the mother who can't look her son in the eye. They just see a 10-minute video that entertained them while they were on the bus or eating lunch. I gave them our lives and they gave me a thumbs up and moved on to the next creator. Looking back, I see that wealth gained through the humiliation of the people you love isn't wealth at all. It's just a very expensive form of loneliness. I thought I was saving my family from poverty, but I ended up bankrupting our hearts. I've tried calling them, I've tried sending money, but they won't take a dime. They're back in a small apartment 2 towns over, and from what I hear, they're actually happy. They have their souls back. while I'm sitting here in a house full of things, staring at a screen that doesn't love me back. I see them sometimes from a distance, walking to the grocery store or sitting on a park bench, talking and laughing. Really laughing, not the for the camera kind. And I realize they are richer now than I will ever be again. If there's any lesson here, it's that some things are too sacred to be turned into content. And once you cross that line, there is no going back. The internet is a hungry beast, and if you don't feed it your soul, it'll eventually find a way to take it anyway. I'm thinking about deleting the channel tonight. I'm thinking about giving the money away. But a part of me is still scared of the cold, still scared of the pennies on the kitchen table. And that fear is the real prank. The way it makes you stay in the dark just because the lights are expensive. Like this video if you think I went too far and were on my parents' side for leaving. Subscribe for more stories that show the dark side of the internet and the things people do for fame. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did the money make it worth it, or did I destroy my life for nothing? I'll see you all in the next story.